June 1st, 2009. Somewhere over the mid-Atlantic Ocean. 35,000 feet. Air France Flight 447 vanishes from radar. No distress call, no warning, no witness. 228 people gone. For nearly 2 years, no one knew what happened. The wreckage lay hidden beneath almost 4 kilometers of ocean. When investigators finally recovered the flight recorders, what they found inside was more disturbing than anyone had expected. This wasn't a mechanical failure. This wasn't a storm. This was something far more unsettling and far more important for every flight that has taken off since.
June 1st, 2009. Somewhere over the mid-Atlantic Ocean. 35,000 feet. On the evening of May 31st, 2009, Air France Flight 447 departed Rio de Janeiro's Galeão International Airport, bound for Paris Charles de Gaulle. The aircraft was an Airbus A330, one of the most advanced and reliable passenger jets in the world at the time. On board, 216 passengers and 12 crew members, 228 people in total, representing 32 nationalities. Because of the flight's length, over 11 hours, the crew included 3 pilots instead of the usual 2, Captain Marc Dubois and 2 first officers, Pierre-Cédric Bonin and David Robert. The arrangement allowed each pilot to take a scheduled rest break during the cruise phase. At around 2 a.m. UTC, with the aircraft cruising over the remote mid-Atlantic, Captain Dubois left the cockpit for his rest break. He left Bonin in charge, with Robert beside him. It was a routine handover on a routine night. What happened next was not routine at all.
To understand what went wrong, you need to understand one small component, a device called a pitot tube. Pitot tubes are small sensors mounted on the outside of an aircraft. They measure airspeed by reading the pressure of air flowing into them. Without accurate airspeed data, a pilot cannot safely fly an aircraft at high altitude. Too fast and the plane risks structural damage. Too slow and it stalls, loses the lift that keeps it in the air. At cruise altitude, the air temperature outside is around -50 degrees Celsius. In certain weather conditions, particularly around towering storm systems over tropical oceans, ice crystals can form and block the opening of the pitot tubes in seconds. Air France had known about this problem for over a year. Between May 2008 and March 2009, 9 separate incidents of temporary airspeed loss had been recorded in the airline's own safety reports, all involving A330 and A340 aircraft, all in cruise at high altitude. An upgrade to the pitot probes had been ordered, but on the night of June 1st, 2009, Flight 447's aircraft, registered FGZCP, had not yet received the modification. At 0206 UTC, Bonin warned the cabin crew that they were about to enter an area of turbulence. 3 minutes later, the aircraft flew into icing conditions. Ice crystals began accumulating in the pitot tubes. What followed happened in 4 minutes and 23 seconds. At 2:10:05 UTC, all 3 pitot tubes failed simultaneously. The autopilot, which depends on accurate airspeed data, disconnected automatically. The flight control system shifted from normal law, which protects against stalls and extreme maneuvers, to alternate law, which removes those protections entirely. An alarm sounded. Warning lights lit up across the instrument panel. Bonin, who had relatively little experience flying the aircraft manually at high altitude, reacted instinctively. He pulled back on his side stick, raising the nose of the aircraft. It was the wrong response. At 35,000 feet, in alternate law, with no reliable airspeed reading, pulling the nose up bleeds off speed and pushes the aircraft toward a stall. The stall warning activated. The automated voice began repeating one word through the cockpit.
Stall! Stall! Stall!
Robert, the other co-pilot, immediately recognized the problem.
Pay attention to your speed. Pay attention to your speed. For a brief moment, Bonin eased back on the stick. The aircraft began to recover. The stall warning fell silent. the plane was still flyable. Then, Bonin pulled back again. The reason is one of the most debated questions in aviation psychology. The BEA's final report suggested that Bonin may have been experiencing what investigators call startle effect, a physiological response to sudden, unexpected crisis that can temporarily override trained behavior. He may have been trying to climb away from the turbulence below, applying the same instinct a pilot uses during takeoff or a go-around. At 35,000 feet, in a stall, that instinct was fatal. Robert, realizing what was happening, pushed his own stick forward to correct. But neither pilot could see what the other was doing. Airbus side sticks are not physically linked, and there was no visual indicator showing each pilot the other stick position. Robert did not know Bonin was still pulling back. The inputs canceled each other out. 1 minute and 30 seconds after the crisis began, Captain Dubois returned to the cockpit.
What the hell are you doing?
We've lost control of the plane!
We've totally lost control of the plane. We don't understand at all. We've tried everything.
The stall warning had now sounded 75 times. The aircraft's nose was pitched 15 degrees upward. Its forward speed had dropped below 100 knots, less than a third of what it should have been. It was falling at 10,000 feet per minute. At 02:14:28 UTC, Flight 447 struck the surface of the Atlantic Ocean at high speed, wings nearly level. The impact was unsurvivable. 228 people lost their lives. The initial search recovered 50 bodies and around 3,000 pieces of debris within days. But the aircraft itself, and critically, its flight recorders, was nowhere to be found. The mid-Atlantic at that location is nearly 4,000 meters deep, 4 kilometers of black ocean spread across thousands of square kilometers of search area. Multiple underwater search missions, costing tens of millions of dollars, came back empty. It was not until April 2011, almost 2 years after the crash, that a team from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, the same organization that helped locate the Titanic, finally found the wreckage on the ocean floor. The flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder were recovered intact. What they contained answered the last great mystery of modern aviation and raised questions that the industry is still grappling with today. The BEA's final report, published in July 2012, identified the chain of events with precision. But its most important finding was not what went wrong in those 4 minutes. It was why the crew was unprepared for it. The pitot tube failure was a known, documented problem. The upgrade had been ordered. It simply hadn't been installed in time. But the deeper issue was training. Modern aircraft like the A330 are so automated, so protected by computer systems, that pilots rarely fly them manually at high altitude. When those protections disappear without warning in the middle of the night over the ocean, the cognitive and physical gap between what pilots are trained to do and what the situation demands can be catastrophic. The BEA's 41 safety recommendations reshaped pilot training worldwide. Airlines were required to increase manual flying practice at altitude. Simulators were updated to include realistic high-altitude upset scenarios. The recommendation to install angle of attack indicators, instruments that show directly whether an aircraft is stalling, regardless of airspeed, became a major point of debate across the industry. One design question from AF 447 has never been fully resolved. Should the side sticks in an Airbus cockpit be physically linked so that each pilot can feel what the other is doing? The BEA did not make that recommendation, but the question remains open. Air France 447 did not crash because of a faulty sensor alone. It did not crash because of one pilot's mistake alone. It crashed because a series of systems, technical, human, and organizational, each failed in ways that seemed individually manageable, but together left no margin for recovery. The stall warning sounded 75 times. Each of those warnings was correct. The aircraft could have been saved at almost any point in those 4 minutes. The lesson of AF 447 is not that pilots failed, it is that the entire system,
Training, design, maintenance priorities, and the relationship between automation and the humans who fly with it had not prepared anyone for the moment when everything went wrong at once. That conversation is still happening, and every flight that takes off today is safer because of it. If you want to understand how those conversations shape the future of aviation, one disaster at a time, subscribe. We'll be back next week with another investigation.